the Culture, Leadership, and Career Show. I am president of Fireproof Leadership, and I'm also the author of The Arsonist in the Office. Excited today to have an old friend on with us. His name is Ray Green. We're going to be talking more in just a minute with Ray. First off, I want to thank you for joining us today, listening to the show. We're going to be talking with somebody who's walking in to organizations that need help from the ground up. Some other times they just need an expert to come in and kind of put a little bit of polish on a successful organization. So excited about having Ray Green here with us. We're going to talk more about everything from culture to leadership to building that team that you want and building the processes that are going to get things done. So Ray, let's kick it off. Thanks for coming on today, man.
Thanks for having me, bud. I'm happy to be here.
So, Ray, I was going to try and do it, but of course I'm going to butcher everything about your past and shift things around and screw things up. Tell us about you.
Well, easy to butcher the background, man. It's a unique background. My start in really entrepreneurship when I was in my late teens, early 20s. Started with throwing raves and actually sold my first company doing that. Went into, then I thought this is where we became friends. I thought I loved politics and joined the Chamber of Commerce and was with the Chamber for 16 years. And by the time I left the Chamber, I had oversight of basically everything small, mid-sized business outside of DC. So small business membership and fundraising, the contact center, direct mail. From there, I was recruited by some investors to go help them turn around some small businesses that they were buying. So they'd buy up these small companies and then try to turn them around. They'd plug me in as a CEO, or I joke sometimes like a glorified sales manager to get in there. It kind of turn things around and get it ready to hopefully sell again or something.
The title sounds great, and then you realize you're doing everything, right?
Yeah, damn straight, man. Like the first time you learn, you go, really want that CEO role. And then after you go, you know what, next time I'm going to do some more due diligence on this. You know,
they're not all created equal on those titles.
So I did that for a couple of years, and I hit a wall, man. I burnt out, and my wife and I moved our two kids. We moved down to Baja, moved down to Cabo, and I set up shop and said, you know what? I'm tired of working for other people. I'm tired of building other people's dreams. I'm gonna start building my own and be my own boss. And since then, I've been doing consulting and sales consulting and business coaching for close to 4 years, 3.5 years now. And so I've been doing that here from Cabo. So a little diverse background, but here we are, man.
Ray, there's no way I'm going to let you get by with just kind of going through I built a company that ran raves and without more explanation. So let's dig into that. Okay, Chamber, you're working with Fortune 500 companies, going to their boards, asking for $1 million checks. And then deep in your past, you just, you talk about it some, but we're going to focus on it for a few minutes. Tell me what that was all about. And I also want to know some things like you mentioned you started and have sold some other companies. It's amazing how much what you're doing now, which is big stuff. You built an online following. You solicited those $1 million contributions, but you started out with raves. I think most of us will remember those. I was not invited to many of them. I wasn't cool enough. Tell me about that. What were you doing? What was that like? Grabbing 20s from folks as they're coming in? What's going on with that?
I thought we were going to gloss over that piece.
Oh, no.
We're going to dive all the way in.
The spotlight is on.
Got it. So it's funny. I wasn't invited to any cool ones. That's why I started throwing my own. No, I went to.
When you zig, they zag.
Right, exactly. Like go that way. But I went to my first rave, man, and I walked in, and I was new to electronic music and everything, and I was like, okay, like this is interesting. This is different. And it was this huge event center, like massive. I think it was in St. Joe, Missouri, and I mean, thousands of people are there, and I'm like, wow, this is kind of impressive. And this guy walks up and he hands me a flyer, and I was with my girlfriend at the time, and I was like, interesting. And she said, oh, that's the guy that's throwing this party. And I said, really? And I can't remember what he was wearing, but it had to be glow sticks and maybe a cow suit or something. I don't know. But I was like, he's throwing this whole thing? And she said, yeah. Said, well, how hard can this be? Like this can't. It I was like, all right. So I was like, I'm gonna figure this out. So I just started asking around, talking to other promoters, people that were throwing it. Decided I think this is something that I think is pretty cool. And you know, the idea of having thousands of people pay you $20, $30, $40 to come see a show and, you know, music show, that I thought it was interesting. So threw my first one in Omaha through another one in Omaha, helped promote some others in like St. Joe, St. Louis, all over the Midwest. And it just kind of, it took off. Like, I think I was so young that I didn't know what I didn't know. So I was just dumb. I was just dumb enough to try. I was like, all right, like I didn't have a business model. I didn't have a business plan. I was just like, this seems fun. Let's try to put this shit together. So, and it worked.
I love it. And that's the core of entrepreneurialism, right?
Yep.
You look at something and 95% of people are going to say, no way, I don't know anything about it. I've never done it before. I don't know anybody that's done it. You're looking at it and thinking, all right, I think I can monetize it. I can learn as I go and make it work. The other thing, and I think this is where minds are going to be blowing coast to coast after I drop this, is the guy set up raves in Omaha and St. Joseph's, Missouri, and not exactly places where you'd think that business would be there, but you saw the niche and you grew it.
Saw the niche and I grew it. But like it actually, I always clarify this. Usually when I do intros, I usually say, listen, they were like legitimate. Like I had, tax IDs, I had, paid security, like legitimate businesses that were run, and because a lot of them weren't. And that the business that I was using to throw the raves, I realized that there was another opportunity. I could start representing the DJs that I was booking. So I started representing DJs, and then I saw some other opportunities with other people, and you can invest in other events. And at one point, I started the first online booking agency for DJs. So it evolved. It started with raves, but into representing DJs. Some of them went on to XM shows and other things, and the online booking agency. So it turned into something like pretty legitimate, but it wasn't part of a grand vision. It was just young entrepreneur, kind of too dumb to not know that I wasn't supposed to do certain things and was just plowing forward,
Yeah, and I love that you were like the Warren Buffett of raves there by finding other like businesses and knowing, okay, I understand this, so I can understand this one, and making money all the way around. It's good stuff. So when we worked together, you were part of a sales team. Then you went on to lead that sales team, and you learned to lead that sales team to the point where y'all were reaching levels that they hadn't before, that you hadn't before. You took it from something that was really good into something that was spectacular, and had some great people ahead of you to compare to, and did some great things with that. But one of the things that I noticed, that everybody noticed within the chamber world, was you got some great people that were working there. Folks that frankly they continue to be there. That some of that culture that you built has continued on. Talk to me about, as you built your team. Obviously, you're an entrepreneur now, and you've got an interesting business model where you're partnering with various folks around the world and around the country to offer services. But talk to me about how you built that team inside the organizations you've worked for, and how do you build that culture that's going to be successful?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And when I started there, I didn't love sales. Like I went into that following doing the event space, like with promoting raves, then helped my mom turn around her business, and we sold that to investors. And the reason I went into the chamber was I loved politics, right? I thought I loved politics 20 years ago, 30 years ago. But I said, you know what, I want to do that. And so sales was the stepping stone. Like I actually saw myself I was going to get my law degree. I wanted to be a lobbyist. Like that was the road that I wanted to go down. And sales was just the stepping stone, the way that I was going to get into the organization. So this role happened to open up. It was phone sales, doing membership sales and telemarketing. And I went in and I bombed the interview, but I managed to make up for it with political knowledge. And they said, we'll try it. And I eventually got some really good management, some really good mentorship that helped me learn the sales part of it. Got promoted into management, then got promoted into senior management. And when I was initially promoted to run the inside sales division, there was a lot of change, like in the senior leadership role. So I was one of the only managers that was really left. And I had a unique opportunity because we were in Dallas and it was its own business unit. So I had my own P&L, kind of an autonomous business unit. DC was almost an independent business, and it had just the Dallas office had just undergone a lot of like negative. It was there was attrition, leadership changes, management changes, and it just wasn't on the right trajectory. So they said, Ray, can you run this thing? And I'm like, sure. I hadn't run a sales team before. So I took the role, and one of the first things that we did was we installed core values. And I learned it from watching the late Tony Hsieh from Zappos, right? Like I had studied Zappos quite a bit and some other organizations that were really strong on culture. And from Hsieh's book, I think it was Delivering Happiness, I bought everybody in the office a copy. And I said, hey, we're installing core values. And about half the office basically said, hey, listen, young kid.
Yeah.
Thanks for your hippie bullshit, but we're going to keep pressing on.
Keep your kumbaya to yourself.
Exactly. Like, yeah, that's a little woo-woo. And a lot of these guys had been there for a long time. And here I was very young, and relatively speaking. And but I was set. Like that was the vision that I had for that team. And had a few key influencers, key people on the team that I knew I could rely on to help me install them. We created 11 core values, and I started hiring and firing based almost exclusively on values. Like it was less about call count. It was less about most of the sales metrics that you look at typically. And I said, I'm just going to start focusing almost exclusively on core values, because the core values, in my view, and I still believe this to this day, if you have the right core values, the rest takes care of itself, right? Like I have to manage the number of calls that you're making far less if that is baked into the environment and the culture that I'm running, that we're a highly productive, high performing team, that's just the expectation. It's the expectation of the peers. So that was like one of the first things that we did.
Let me ask you this. Was there ever really times when you were seeing from that experience or other experiences where you see the folks that are in line with your core values not measuring up similarly in the other areas? Essentially, once they're bought in, they tend to be bought in everywhere, right?
No, I think you're right. So if you're bought in on the core values, what effectively happens, or what's happened to me when we've done it, is the environment itself becomes part of the benefits package.
Yeah.
And I am willing to work harder and do whatever I need to do to stay here, because I really love working here. And part of our culture was I wanted more entrepreneurially minded salespeople. So there was a lot of autonomy. There was flexibility with schedules. There was, at one point, I even tested, hey, listen, and this was all outside, like DC had its own set of things. We basically built a subculture though, and I had the autonomy to do it. And the best of the benefit of being a sales organization, like as long as my P&L was good, and as long as we were crushing numbers, it's kind of like, I don't know what that guy's doing down there, but seems to be working.
Money keeps coming. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had some freedom. But what I have found is when people buy into the core values, if you have the values set right, it will take care of itself. Like, for example, somebody comes in and says there's an expectation that we're going to be an extraordinarily fun and highly productive environment, which was the first core value. And, if somebody's not hitting the numbers and you start coaching them and they're not, okay, is the activity there? Are you trying to, like, the production numbers and things like that? Okay. Well, another core value was be humble. Right. And so when you're
coaching.
Yeah. When you're coaching, are they responding? Are they listening? Are they adapting? And when people are doing that, if you have a decent sales process, they will perform, right? They're taking the coaching and you have a good process. Every time that somebody wasn't performing, you could look at one of the values and say, that's the reason. And that was ultimately, I can tell you, the number of people that I let go in a sales organization, in an insights, a phone sales organization too, the number of people that I let go for performance, not culture, was almost zero. Almost every time it was a culture issue, and the performance was a symptom of the underlying.
I hear this a lot, but in a lot of cases where folks don't feel the vibe in your culture, you coming in, Ray, as the new leader of the organization, sometimes folks are going to want to stick around, but a lot of times, if you're changing the way things are going, folks start self-selecting out. Much as your team becomes stronger, the ones that want to be part of what you're doing, they love the values, they're latching on, they see the benefit, like you say, others start looking for the door. Is that some of your experience?
Yeah, it's absolutely the experience. The what inevitably happens if there was a chart, we could probably whiteboard this, but you go through these different phases, and the first one is they think you're full of shit.
Yeah.
Like, hey, he's pie in the sky and he's talking this woo woo shit. Like, it'll fade, guys. Don't worry about it. Like, it'll go away. So let's just wait it out, and that's part of it. And then there's actual dissension, like when they start realizing, oh, like this might not be going somewhere. Then they start pushing back. Then they start raising their hand. Then they go to corporate. Then they start trying to go around you.
One of the best parts when I see it happening with my consulting and training clients is when you're sending these messages and those folks that start to become problems, they start seeing their peers in the organization getting excited and latching onto the values and saying, all right, we need accountability in this place. We need, whatever the missing ingredients are, and they're seeing them from you. But those problem children, for lack of a better word, start almost self-selecting that they are not part of the team, the organization. They start getting that feeling of discomfort. For leaders listening today, listen to what Ray's talking about just now. Some of those hard decisions that are stopping you from taking that step to shape your culture, you don't even end up making them. The problem folks in your organization are folks that don't want to latch on to what you're doing. Start taking those steps for you, because frankly, you're making them uncomfortable in a way that's going to be good for your organization.
Yeah. Well, it was my view, and it remains, I still feel very, very strongly about all these things. In organizations of all size, the culture itself was the most important thing to maintain. And culture is, I know it's difficult to describe. I know it's fairly ambiguous, and people have different different definitions of what it means to them and what's good and what's bad. Like it's neither here nor there. If I'm running a business or a business unit or whatever it is, and I have a vision for what that culture is going to be, my vision of that culture is the single most important thing that I need to maintain and protect. And that meant, and even in a sales organization, or especially in a sales organization, I think it becomes more difficult, because that meant even as a top performer, you were not immune to having to adhere to the core values. And most of my life has been spent in sales organizations and some small businesses, but that's a difficult concept for people to grasp. And that means number one person, hey, you will be fired. Like I will take the short-term hit for the long-term gain. Because if I have to accept somebody that violates the core values or isn't aligned with the culture or whatever it is, because of their individual performance in the short run, you're never going to be able to build a strong, sustainable culture that's capable of maintaining itself. And when you do it right, exactly what you just described happens. What happens is I no longer am the person building the culture. I'm just here like hating it, because the rest of the team feels so strongly about it, and they are going to protect it. And when somebody comes in as a bad apple, they're like, whoa, listen here. Like, we have it pretty good here. We're high performing. We're getting accolades from corporate or from the board. We're hitting our numbers. We're getting paid more. We get all this flexibility. We're winning. This feels good. And one a-hole comes in, and that's all it takes to screw things up. So my job becomes just policing the individual pieces once it's built and in motion. You know what I mean?
It is both the test you don't want, because who likes firing anybody, but it's the best test of the leadership of any leader that there is of, all right, is Ray serious about this culture thing? Yeah, he just fired our top person on the sales team. Sends a message that's absolutely unforgettable, one way or the other. Either you deal with it or you duck it. And that is how I think just about any leader, that's going to be their legacy. That's what they're going to be remembered for in so many different ways.
The first time you don't do it, Pete, like the first time that somebody, hey, I'm the number one producer, I'm the number two producer, and I get immunity. The first time that happens, you no longer have values and you no longer have a culture. Like, what you have is you have mercenaries, and that's fine. Some cultures want mercenaries. It's not what I wanted. And I felt so strongly about it, some of the backstory to this, but I felt so strongly about it that when I was CEO of one of the companies that I was running, I fired the top producer for that reason. And the board disagreed with my decision, and we disagreed. Like, it was one of the core reasons that we parted ways, because I can't run a company unless I have the freedom and the flexibility to build an organization. And I can't do that if I have to let prima donnas do whatever they want
Yeah.
because they sell so much. Like at that point, I'm no longer in control and driving
Yeah.
the leadership.
Yeah, you're in a hostage situation, and you're the hostage.
Exactly.
Yep. Absolutely. If you follow Ray Green on LinkedIn, you're going to hear somebody who's talking about what they've learned as an entrepreneur, mistakes made, achievements made. You're watching in real time a guy build a pretty incredible business. But one of the things I love is you talk a lot about the mentors you've had, coaching. You coach people, you do that every day, but also you get coached. You are not afraid to say you're getting help along the way. And I know that can be a touchy subject among leaders who are themselves, that think they've learned everything. Talk to me about what mentors and coaches have meant in your career. How's it made you a better leader?
Dude, I would say, and I appreciate everything that you said. That's a lot of lessons to share when you make as many when you're building in public, as you know, like some of your mistakes are going to be in public. So you just share your lessons and hopefully other people learn from them.
And at the very least, it's more content. So
it is.
If nothing else.
It's great content. But the funny thing is, and I'll get to the coaches and mentors. Every time I've shared a mistake that I thought, I don't know, this is kind of vulnerable. This is kind of embarrassing. Every time I've done it, there's a bunch of people that go, thank you for sharing that. Like I actually did the same thing. It makes me feel better knowing like we're not alone. Like those of us that are building online, there's an affinity to go, thanks for sharing that. Like that makes, because we're sitting here kind of like solopreneurs a lot of times, like, and we don't have that.
Talk a little about what mentors and coaching is doing for you, has done for you, and what's doing for you going forward.
Man, it's such a good question. I get really passionate about culture and I get really passionate about mentors and coaches. And the reason is I would love to sit here and say I've accomplished everything that I've done, which relatively speaking, I'm very grateful for everything that I've accomplished, but none of it has been possible without some really significant influences. Like when throwing my first rave, like I had somebody, his name's Terrence Pree, and he was a competitor. And he helped me, showed me how to do something that I would not have, who knows how many events I would have had to have thrown to learn the lessons that I got from one person. And my first one was an absolute hit. Like it was, that would not have happened without some insight. The chamber, like I said, I went in there and I sucked at sales, Pete. I wasn't good. I'm an introvert. I'm quiet. I was not built to be a salesperson. And David Watson, who he mentored me, he coached me, and he was patient with me, like teaching me. He saw something that said, I'm going to continue coaching. Like if I had worked for somebody else, I probably would have had a pretty shitty sales career.
You might have been doing something else.
I would definitely be doing something else but he took the time and he built me and he helped me develop. Shannon, who you also know, like she's the one that gave me the autonomy but coached me on the side and gave me the resources, sent me to Georgetown leadership, helped me get some really, really high caliber coaches and mentors like Rick Corcoran, who coaches some of the top execs in DC, Bob Perkins, who was the former CMO of Calvin Klein and Playboy. Like I've had these resources, I've had these people that have helped me along the way. And what it's done is it's fast tracked, it's accelerated everything that maybe I could have figured it out on my own. And, I like to, I take some pride in being a resourceful person and, hey, I can roll up my sleeves and get the answers. But, that's an expensive, frustrating, long way to do things sometimes. And when you have mentors and you have coaches that can just get you the answer faster or develop you or tell you, hey, here's where you need to improve. For me personally, it would take 2 or 3 lifetimes to get to the same level of experience I have today without it.
And I think one of the things you just hit on is, frankly, and I've seen it in my own career, I've seen it when you're going into a job that has a great salary, a lot of different things, some prestige to the name. But if you're not asking in an interview, and in your case, you kind of learned as you went, and not that you lucked into an organization that was going to be supportive, but when you're taking, for that person listening, trying to figure out how do I find Ray Green's level of success in business, you could have had people basically saying, Ray, go figure it out. I don't know what to tell you. I've got too much going on. in my world right now to babysit you and your challenges. And every time that happens in a company, you usually have an employee going out the door, and they're going to be bringing somebody else in who's going to hit those same brick walls. So great stuff. Yeah,
I
kudos to
would
those
say,
organizations that are doing that.
yeah, absolutely. And take the chamber, for example, I did luck out. Like I picked that organization because I wanted to go into politics, and it was the sales job that was available in Dallas for me. Like, so from that standpoint, I didn't pick the bosses and the coaches and the mentors that I managed to find in my career. But I can tell you, if I had the opportunity to go back and tell younger me or somebody else anything about career development, it would be pick your boss. Like pick your boss very, very carefully, and especially in your 20s, maybe even in your 30s. Like, where are you going to learn the most? Where are you going to get fast tracked? Who's giving you the resources? Who's investing in you? Who's developing your skills? And I see it not just with me, but with a lot of my friends that are at similar levels that have done similar things. You can look, you can dissect their career, and it's very similar. They all had people that helped them early on accelerate the learning curve and gave them resources and invested in them. And it's night and day. And there's people that I know that are way better salespeople than me, way better. Like they're probably smarter than me. They're probably better business people. But if you don't have some of the advantages, which are, just the extra thing that a really good organization puts behind its people, there's a reason those organizations outperform their competitors. And it's not just like the fundamentals you see on the P&L. A lot of it has to do with how they develop their people.
Yep. And so many career lessons in that, asking the right questions and not being afraid to stick your neck out. I mean, when you're asking those things, you could have heard something very different from those people and just decided, all right, looks like I'm here for the ride, and either, jumped at some point, which could have changed your career, or, took it as, all right, well, I guess I'm gonna be mediocre here. I'll ride it out as long as the benefits and salary continue the way they are, and just other ways to run organizations. It's good stuff.
You said I share my mistakes. So I just shared what went well. I've done it the wrong way too. And so when I left into my first CEO role, I didn't ask a lot of those questions because I was kind of blinded by CEO role, private equity, like this is everything that I wanted, so it was like dog caught the car, let's just jump into this. And I didn't do the due diligence that I wish I did. Ask the questions that you're suggesting that you ask. And I got into it, and it was a complete shit show. It wasn't a board that was going to be supporting, like it wasn't the environment that I was used to. And I didn't have the flexibility and autonomy to run a business the way that I wanted to. And if I had it to do over again, I would say, Ray, ask better questions. Like don't be blinded by the paycheck or the equity or the title, or like get down to like brass tacks. Like, what is it going to be like to work in this place? And how is it going to help me grow? Like both as a person, as a professional. And
what do you care about? What do you not care about?
Yep.
What are your metrics? What's your timeline? Yeah.
Yep.
And are you going to be overseeing me, or are you going to be micromanaging me? So many good nuggets in there. So you're working with all sorts of organizations now. You've once you develop that kind of sales guru type of thing, you get calls from all sorts of different companies. I know all of them probably have slightly different problems at all sorts of different levels. We've talked a lot today about culture being the core of everything. But as you think about the folks that are contacting you, how much really starts right in that culture space of the values, mission, and vision being fuzzy and nobody quite having strong footing after that point?
It's a mix, man. So there's two people that I typically work with. And one is, it's people like me, right? Like they want to build their business. They want to be solopreneur, or they want to be independent agent and build $1 million business on their own remotely. The other audience is organizations that are usually upper 7, 8, lower 8 figures that have a sales team. And it's not quite like a random sales type of thing, but they can't quite get the consistency. They can't quite get the high performance at a sustained level, and it's not quite as repeatable as they want. And when I go in, like when I talk to those companies, I would say culture is always a component, right? Because culture, you have a culture, whether it's by design or by default, you have a culture within your organization. And because a culture is just really, it's the way you operate, it's the way you communicate, it's the way you get things done. And so that is going to determine virtually everything else. And so culture is like always a component of it. The other components that are usually underlying that, which are driven by culture, they're symptoms of the culture. It's, do you have consistent processes? Do you have the right systems in place? Do you have the ability, because you have processes and systems in place, to replace people if you need to? Or are you held hostage by one or two salespeople, right?
Yep.
Like, so there's that component. And then the other component is, you mentioned like the fuzzy vision, mission, values piece.
And that can bleed into all parts of the organization.
Absolutely. I mean, it bleeds into the entire organization. But what's interesting is I see a lot of sales organizations or companies that have a stated vision, and sometimes even have it in a PDF, and even have it in the onboarding plan, and the CEO talks about it monthly, but it's not realistic. Like, it's not like there's a whole bunch of people on the team that go, yeah, that's cool, boss, but like the budgets aren't realistic, and we're only hitting, I mean, look at SaaS, like something like 70% of SaaS, like on SaaS companies, 70% of sales teams are actually attaining quota. Imagine the culture of that environment that is just consistently falling short. So a lot of times you do have a vision, and it might even be clear, but it's so off the wall that it's just like, it doesn't get down to the reality of the sales organization at an execution level. And so you have these teams that feel like they're underperforming, but relatively speaking, they're actually doing decent, and so I think it just has to go all the way down from vision to strategy to at the tactical level. And then at the execution level, are all those things integrated? And is everybody aligned? Is everybody rowing the same direction? Is everybody bought in? Because that means if they're not bought in, you're either going to have like this, a lot of people that are quietly, they know that they're going to be underperforming, or they go somewhere else. You know what I mean? Like they get frustrated with, hey, we're just going to keep whipping the sales team, try harder, make more calls, sell more. Right. Like, well, shit, there's market realities too.
You're the person that's going to be driving that one way or the other. The signals that you're sending are going to affect all of that.
Well, I will say, depending on the size of the organization, one of the causes of that is the fear or the inability to speak truth to power. That when you have somebody at a management level or in a leadership role that won't tell an owner or won't tell a CEO, hey, here are the market realities, and have that and put that conversation on the table and allow the visionary or the CEO to say, no, that's not right. We can do it this way, and you get there that way. Or you adjust it based on the market realities. But a lot of people won't, they're quietly saying that vision's not a reality, instead of saying, we don't believe it. Can you sell us on that, please? Or can we have a conversation about that? When you can speak truth to power and put those candid, direct, real conversations on the plate, I think that's where you start to develop some really good, healthy cultures.
Which means people need to understand that they can speak up without risking their job to say those things, which is huge.
It's true. Yeah, I say that, but you're right. Like in a lot of environments, speak truth to power means you go find another job.
Yeah. I mean, you hear a lot of that, and it comes down, and at times one of the biggest factors there is, and some of that may not be accurate, but that fear is there because they don't know their leader. They haven't had that hard conversation. They've heard about the open door policy, but as some clients of mine said recently, I sent the leaders out of the room to have a talk with the employees. And I said, I heard your boss talk about their open door that they've got. Anybody walking through that open door? And the answer was no, because they didn't know the person. I was going to say behind the door. If the door's open, it's nothing behind it. Anyway, inside the room. That's where I was going with that. I've got a few more minutes, and I want to talk with you about a few more things. So you talked a little bit about, your personality. What did you use the term introverted?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Introvert and CEO don't always go together. So you have probably had to change some mindsets at times on people's expectations of what you were going to be doing. Not that you were walking through saying, "Hi, I'm Ray, I'm an introvert, and I want to show you my leadership style." But there's a lot of people in that boat, and they kind of get steered away because they're not the glad handers that are going to hit all the parties and stuff like that, moving up the ladder. You moved up the ladder in a little bit of a different way. What's worked for you as that introvert CEO, the introvert leader? You've had to develop, what have you done differently that's worked for you? Because there's a lot of people probably in this audience and elsewhere that have all the skills, they've got all the talent, but maybe don't get to the level you have. What's worked for you to take your personality traits and turn them into a person that's looked to for leadership?
It's a good question too. I don't know if you, Rick Corcoran, another mentor of mine from the chamber, he defined introvert and extrovert as an introvert is somebody that it drains their energy to be charismatic and outgoing. Like they can do it, but it drains their energy. It's not. Whereas an extrovert, like when they go to the cocktail party and they're walking around mingling, like that energizes them. Like they leave the party like, boom, I'm ready to go. I leave that party and I'm like, I'm ready to go into a hotel room and just sit quietly and stare at TV. So that's kind of how I think of introvert, extrovert. And from a personality standpoint, one of the first times I was promoted in like a senior role, one of my bosses at the time said, because the boss before me was very extroverted. I mean, balloons and shit hanging from all over the place. I mean, weekly contests, like weekly speeches, like rah. And he taught me a ton. Like, it was, so it's not a right or wrong, but I was like, I don't know that I can do that. And in her advice, she said, you don't need to. The office and the team will eventually take on the style that you lead. Like that, the office took on those characteristics because that was his personality. And what that means is I had to find other ways that were maybe not as loud to communicate as clearly. And I did that with strong meeting cadences, but not overly meeting. Like, so like from a sales organization, every Monday, like we'd meet, we'd hit all the numbers. I became better at writing. Like the team could expect me to communicate really effectively, very clearly in my writing. And they were expected and they were held accountable to reading those messages. Because what happens with a lot of times is people try to send those like, well, nobody reads my emails. There has to be an accountability system. So I relied a lot on writing. And I found that one of the best forms of communication is action. And I don't have to talk about what the rationale behind, what I believe and a lot of the other stuff that may go into rah-rah speeches. When people see bad behavior and they see it addressed, communication's over. Like
1,000 words right there. Yep.
Yeah, we've talked about it. And when behavior is aligned with the value and they see it rewarded, like, so you can do a lot without saying a word, like through your actions. And that was one of the biggest lessons for me. And that's where, when I see junior managers today, it's not having the tough conversations. It's not having the really candid, like giving the candid feedback. It's not addressing the conflict that like they're letting it fester. It's not addressing the top performer that's being an asshole because they have a lot in sales. Action will go a long way to overcoming like not being quite as extroverted or cheerleader type. You know what I mean?
Yeah, good stuff. So I saw you drop something on LinkedIn today. It was the 9 things that your MBA didn't teach you. And big price tag for the MBA, but the biggest stuff was what you've learned along the way. What are some of the big things you've learned that none of those fancy professors taught you that are impacting you in bigger ways than anything out of school?
I don't regret getting, like, I'm not an entrepreneur that becomes a anti-MBA guy. My MBA, without it, it would not have gotten me into private equity, which would not have gotten me into. So it was a critical part. And when I was considering getting my MBA, one of my mentors said, you're going to get it for 3 reasons. One is going to be the network. One is going to be the education. One is going to be the initials. Right. And that's how you're going to pick. And you're going to, if you want one with all 3, you're going to pay the higher price tag and all that. And so I went into it kind of knowing that. And went through it, loved my MBA, great experience, have great friends. But then I went and started my business. And I can tell you, no bullshit, that the MBA did very little to prepare me to start a business. It prepared me to step into an existing business or Fortune 500 or a large corporation and run it, but it did very little to teach me how to start a business. And so when I say that, things like that, like I didn't know the first thing about, hey, I heard riches are in the niches. How do you pick a niche? How do you create an offer? Like when I'm selling my services, how do I package and productize consulting services? How do I price them? How do I build a funnel? Like, how do I build an audience? How do I monetize an audience? How do I, like, these are all things that from beginning to end, right? From productizing to marketing to selling to delivering services in the business that I do today. I don't think, in my view, my MBA didn't teach me how to do any of that. Like I went to school, right? I did my executive MBA. I applied it. Then I started my own business online. And I feel like I've just been going to school again. I've been buying coaching programs, buying other consultants, advisors, people that have done it before me, because the 125 grand that I spent on my MBA, which again, I don't regret, didn't prepare me to actually start this business. And
unless you've done it, you can't teach somebody else.
Yeah,
exactly. You can, but you're never going to learn all of those lessons.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of people teaching people how to do things that they haven't done. And I think sometimes it can be done, but I also think that's the problem with internet sale. Like online internet expertise today is you sift through and determine who are the people with the real expertise versus who are the,
absolutely. Yeah.
18-year-old life coaches,
Everyone, it's almost surprising not to see someone list themselves, for instance, as a best-selling author, because the definitions have just warped so much, And for anybody listening, Ray, should I tell people this or keep this to ourselves? Sure.
Do it, man. I don't even know what it is. Go for it.
This whole thing about anytime you see someone marketing themselves as a best-selling author on Amazon, you can use that label, and actually they give you some little logo or something like that, so you can use it as like your Crips or Bloods identification card for the rest of your life. Because on one day in one category, you sold more books than anybody else. So these authors I did not do this. I didn't know about, okay, go find, put yourself in left-handed, bilingual San Diego Padres fans niche of books. Throw yourself into that, and maybe 6 books will sell in a day. But gosh darn it, you can call yourself a best-selling author for the rest of your life. And that kind of stuff goes on. Well, Ray, I want to thank you for your time. I want to tell everyone that if you want to reach out to Ray, contact information is going to be in the show notes. And we've got some good stuff that we're providing listeners today. I think they've learned more about the rave process. They've learned more about the Ray process. So I will leave it at that. We're going to wrap up today. I want to thank you for joining Gas, Glue, and Guardrails, the Culture, Leadership, and Career Show. If you like what you've heard today, please give us a 5-star rating and a great review. Follow us and subscribe to Gas, Glue, and Guardrails. I want to thank you for joining us, and catch us next time. Thanks so much.